everyone, I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Dan.
How's it going, Dan?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I am so excited to talk to you. It seems like it's been forever since you and I have made a video together on our own. And naturally, we've finally come back to do our 6,152nd speculation video for Spider-Man movies.
That's right. Another movie featuring Spider-Man came out, so we felt obligated to talk about it.
Once again, yeah, and we can't ever keep it as simple as like just talking about that movie or what was done with Spider-Man. And no, we always have to do a full-blown like future of the franchise video.
Because that's more fun. I mean,
it is,
and especially because Spider-Man is not the main focus of this movie. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff going on in Civil War that isn't Spider-Man, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
No, I thought.
Oh, come on!
But it did leave me wanting more of this version of Spider-Man, which was good, I suppose.
Well, that's the point of it. Absolutely. I mean, that's obviously the main reason he's there, and I think it's funny thinking back to the last couple of times we've done speculation videos on Spider-Man because we were talking about an entirely different franchise that ultimately didn't pan out.
That's right. I mean, we were talking about our hopes for the Sinister Six movie and the Venom solo movie, if that ever happened. And apparently Sony still thinks that's going to happen, which, you know.
Well, of course they do, because Venom is Marvel's most popular character.
Ever. And apparently Sony is still trying to make that animated Spider-Man movie. So maybe if that ever comes to fruition, we can talk about that too. When they revealed the title at that Sony convention, they were talking about the animated movie and how it's going to break ground for the superhero genre, apparently.
Whatever that means.
Yeah.
I love it when you get a soundbite like that, and then people try to make videos and talk about it and speculate about what that means. Where it's like, here's what we know. They're claiming it's gonna break ground. and I'm like, that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, it sounds like investor speak for, we're making a movie that's probably going to be cool.
That we want you to think is more important than your average direct-to-video animated movie, unless it goes to the theater.
I always thought the intention was making it go to the theater, but if it's bad enough,
wow, that'd be cool.
DVD, who knows?
If it doesn't suck.
Yeah.
Now, I gotta tell you, I gotta say this about Venom though. Now that we've got Spider-Man in Marvel, boy, when you go back and you listen to that last speculation video you did, it's gonna sound like Cap and Dan from an alternate universe, like this world that never happened and that we can hardly remember, even though it was just a couple of years ago, because the landscape is so different now. But Dan, now that we've got Spider-Man in Marvel Cinematic, I want that Venom movie, and I want it to be straight up Flash Thompson.
That would be awesome.
You know, doing the Agent Venom movie, it would make so much sense. Imagine the potential parallels for that and Captain America: First Avenger. Like, do another war movie, but set it now.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I mean, I guess if we're going to age Spider-Man in real time, which I hope they do, like they did in the early Stanley Steve Ditko comics, Flash Thompson could eventually become old enough to join the military.
Oh, but we'd have to wait a good long time. That's a good. Yeah, you're right about that. Unless we
unless
we started with an older.
I'm not sure that it's been confirmed that Flash is going to be in this movie, but I would assume he's probably going to be.
I mean, you could have an older Flash Thompson just because you want to make him Venom, but then what's the point of having him even interact with Spider-Man necessarily, unless unless you merged? I mean, I'm just the point of this is wild conjecture. So 4 minutes in, let's already begin our wild conjecture. Something you could do, Dan, is you could, and we've seen this done with other things, not with Marvel so much, but with Marvel Cinematic so much. But couldn't you take Flash Thompson and kind of merge him with Eddie Brock and just have one character?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, I don't know that Flash Thompson as a journalist is something that I'd ever want to see.
No, I'm with you. I mean, at that point, you're just taking a character's name and giving him, hodgepodging together other character traits and, interests and things, I guess. But I'm just saying that, like, they could do a Venom that sort of starts as a villain but very quickly turns into a hero. Kind of like they tried to do in the 90s with Lethal Protector, but it didn't work.
Right, exactly. I think that, if anything, I'd probably want to see Peter Parker with the black costume done right before we would get to that anyway.
Oh yes, of course, but couldn't you go straight from that to good guy Venom? Potentially?
Potentially, yeah. I don't know. I'd want to see him as a villain at least initially, and then have him change. I mean, if anything, it's going to if we get Venom, I would want them to take their time and set him up properly, and do the black costume well.
Yeah, I'm with you, and that's where. And I know we keep going to this place, but that's where, especially now that we've been spoiled with what and I'm using this metaphor because this is just something that I like a whole lot. Like the Daredevil is like the Cadbury cream egg of Marvel television.
Yes.
We've been so spoiled by that now that like all I can do, Dan, is imagine the Black Costume Saga played out on 13 episodes of television.
That would be amazing.
And spectacular.
Yeah, it would. You're right. And web of it would be. It's great.
We did that joke last night of the spoiler cast, but I don't care.
That would be fantastic. And the thing that excites me about potentially seeing the black costume is that they did the straight off the page Spider-Man costume in Civil War, even to the degree that the eyes move. That I think if we got the black costume in live action in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they'd actually do the black costume, and it would be awesome because that's my favorite Spider-Man costume.
Okay, so I don't know if because we don't see a heads-up display or actually go inside the mask or anything, if memory serves. But so I don't know if Spider-Man's costume has AI built into it.
We do see that, like, he has the mask sort of off his face at the end of the fight in Civil War, and it looks rather flimsy. So I don't know if there's a whole lot of tech under there other than the stuff that, like, focuses his eyes, because the explanation in Civil War for why he needs the goggles is that his senses are dialed up to 11, and it's hard for him to focus when he's, like, crime fighting. And
I love that.
Adrenaline rush and stuff, which is an interesting idea. I don't think I've ever seen that done anywhere before.
Yeah.
But you could potentially solve that problem with the symbiote too. I mean, like a living suit its eyes would move too. And
oh yeah, sure. Well, the reason I asked, and I guess this totally blows my idea, but if the suit had AI in it, it would be really interesting to see the Venom symbiote interact with Stark Tech.
Yeah, that would be cool. I kind of hope the suit doesn't have AI.
Me too. I mean, now that you're saying that, especially because. And we'll get into this real soon, but if, as I kind of expect will happen, Spider-Man very much goes rogue and gets away from Tony Stark and isn't using Tony Stark and his money as a crutch for everything, he's got to be able to do things on his own and not rely on that suit.
Right. And I don't think it does anything for him other than focus his vision well, which is good. The wild card for this Spider-Man movie after Civil War for me is Tony Stark, and yes. I've heard people have various opinions about it. I'm going to reserve judgment until we actually see the movie. I know what kind of story I'd like them to tell, but I don't think anything's ruined by Civil War. I think that Tony Stark providing Spider-Man with the suit and stuff like that is an interesting idea, and it solves the problem that you've pointed out a lot with the previous movies, is like, even the Amazing Spider-Man suit, which tried to make itself look a little bit more grounded, looks like a movie production costume that no kid would ever be able to make in his bedroom.
And what's ironic about that is you take the goggles off, and I feel like I could almost buy he built this one.
Yeah, exactly.
Or at least I felt that way from the previews. Now, having seen it in action, it does look a little bit more, not high tech, but just like of greater quality than a dude in his bedroom could make. But man, the first time I saw it in the trailer, I was like, it looks like that TV show costume.
Yeah, it's
but that's just because of the design of it, I think.
Yeah, it's not as like flashy as the Raimi and the Amazing Spider-Man 2 suits look, I think, just because it doesn't have like the raised webbing look on it. It's a little bit more toned down, which is cool because it looks more like the comic book suit, I think.
And it totally works.
Yeah, I mean, it looks fantastic. But I think Tony Stark is going to serve a similar sort of role that Ultimate Nick Fury plays in the Ultimate comics, where Spider-Man is is constantly clashing with him and goes off and does stuff on his own and doesn't want to rely on Shield, or in this case Tony Stark, to solve his problems for him, because Spider-Man has always been someone that wants to deal with his own problems. He tries to at least be a rugged individual most of the time, and I'm really hoping that that's the way they go with Tony Stark, and he's not like a major presence of the movie. I hope Spider-Man like realizes that he doesn't really agree with Tony's side in Civil War, because Peter Parker is not a guy that would want to lose his freedom to choose, as Cap puts it in the movie.
Yes. And that moment where of reverence that he has for Captain America when they realize that they're from towns that are close by, from regions of New York that are close by, is really important, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And like the whole thing with Shield in the Ultimate Comics is Spider-Man doesn't really want their guidance, and he feels like his hands are being tied by them whenever they try to intervene, and then sometimes he feels like they make things worse. So I think that's the way we're going to go with Tony Stark, and I think by necessity, this is by having Tony Stark in the movie and making it believable that Spider-Man wouldn't call Tony Stark in, it forces them to have the classic characterization that I was talking about the character, and furthermore, tell a smaller and more personal story that isn't like the stakes of the earlier movies where like the entire city will blow up if Spider-Man doesn't succeed. I think this will be a story about a villain that doesn't have a take over the city, turn everyone into lizards plot, which I like, because most of the Spider-Man comics don't really deal with plots that large. I mean, there are certainly some that you could point to, but at least the stuff I like, it's just like some dude trying to rob a bank, and Peter Parker's dealing with really troubling things in his personal life, and the Spider-Man stuff is eating into it, and it's causing him to just have a lower quality of life overall because he's stretching himself too thin. And I think that's what this movie's probably going to be about, which is exciting to me.
You touched on a whole bunch of different things. Let me begin with the role Tony Stark is liable to serve in this. I know you had a lot of reservations, like all the way as far as like a year ago when we first heard rumors that are clearly, probably or like definitely true now, that Tony Stark was going to be in this movie. Originally, the rumor was he's going to train Spider-Man to be an Avenger. I think it's pretty likely that's not what that movie is now.
Yeah, I hope so.
And but I had similar reservations to you. Now that we've seen Civil War, and this was the big thing I had to be really careful not to tell you about when I saw it before you, because you kept speculating about what Tony Stark would be doing in that movie, and I was like, don't say anything, because I think and you nailed it, like you guessed this, but I think a lot of people didn't realize that Tony Stark would be the big thing that brought Spider-Man into the thing that brought Spider-Man into the battle in Civil War. I don't know if this is a prediction, but this is a thing that I think the direction they could go with this. I like he could kind of serve that ultimate Nick Fury role, and maybe ultimately, yeah, I said that. I think maybe ultimately he will, but I kind of imagine Tony Stark shows up after Spider-Man has some kind of a high-profile run-in with a bad guy or something, and like fails, maybe has to be bailed out by Tony Stark, maybe something goes really awry and he almost dies or something, and one of the first things Tony Stark says to Spider-Man is, "I thought I told you you're done."
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want Tony Stark to be like Peter Parker's surrogate father figure, really.
I don't either, and I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is, I could see Tony Stark coming in and telling Spider-Man, I was wrong. You're too young. You really shouldn't be doing this." And Spider-Man saying, "No, I have a responsibility, Mr. Stark. I'm going to do what I want to, and you can't stop me." And he tries to cut ties with Stark. And I mean, like, it might be tough to do that and not have Stark constantly butting in and him living his own life, but I kind of, if you can make that work, I kind of rather have that than Spider-Man being an Avenger.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think you mentioned this in the spoiler cast you did with the other panelists. I think it would be awesome if this inclusion of Spider-Man in Civil War serves as the catalyst for him being a loner in the superhero world as well as in his personal life, because those things are interconnected. Peter is a loner because he doesn't let people in very often, because he wants to clean up his own messes. And I think Tony Stark trying to intervene and solve all those problems for him would make the Peter Parker of the comic book sort of annoyed with him.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. I think that should happen. I don't think it would be a surrogate father thing. I think it would be him saying, Stark, you can't fill that void. Maybe even have him compare Stark to, contrast Stark with Uncle Ben, and be like, you're no Uncle Ben.
Yeah, I mean, that would be cool. And I think it would be interesting potentially if Osborn is in this movie, to sort of do some parallels with Osborn and Tony Stark, because they exist and they've been explored in Fraction's Iron Man run before. Norman Osborn is often seen in the comic books as a pseudo father figure for Peter before he realizes that he's a Green Goblin and stuff. And even afterwards, like when he has amnesia and Peter tries to help him. I mean, they do a little bit of that in the first Raimi movie, but it's not as well explored as I would have liked. Like he says at the end, like, you were like a father to me, or you were like a son to me.
And, yeah, like, why does Peter Parker suddenly sound like a chain smoker? I
was trying to do a Defoe. That's who.
I know. I was making fun of you because.
So if they did stuff like that, that would be potentially interesting. There was a rumor that actually came out the other day. Like, it was a big list of rumors that came out, and obviously you got to take these things with a grain of salt. The rumor was that Michael Keaton was not actually in talks to play the Vulture. In fact, he was in talks to play Osborn, which is interesting.
Oh, wow.
So I think it would be good to introduce Osborn and maybe start the parallels with Stark and Spider-Man at the same time if they're going to have Osborn be a major villain in the Marvel Universe.
We should mention, of course, because I know we'll get comments about this, that we're aware that Michael Keaton is no longer in talks for anything.
Right, exactly, yes.
The other thing you mentioned was, Peter Parker as a loner, and that you'd like to see a smaller scale thing. And I want to respond to that for a second. His being another New York superhero, you're going to have to take great care about how you deal with his rogues gallery, obviously, because the question that people had with Iron Man 3 of why didn't you call the Avengers and in other movies will be dialed up to 11 with Spider-Man if you're not careful about how you handle who he's fighting and that sort of thing. I think it makes a lot of sense for Spider-Man to have quite a bit of interplay with other superheroes without being an Avenger. And if they ultimately, eventually put him on an Avengers team and they make it work, maybe I can like that. You and I have always been in agreement that we don't love that. We don't think that it's really in his character to, ultimately want to do that. Like early on, he tries to do that and then discovers that it doesn't work for him and his lifestyle and his worldview. But a lot of people in the comments when we do these videos about Spider-Man, somehow this inevitably always comes up. Dan and Cap hate Spider-Man as an Avenger, and
we are right about it.
So. Some people really like that, and they don't understand why we don't. And of course, some folks, especially folks reading comics that are a lot younger than us, than you especially, are kind of used to seeing Spider-Man constantly teaming up with people, because most of the Marvel books these days are, a character with a lot of other people. Even if it's a solo book, we cross everything all the time. It's no longer a novelty. But I think that because you do have so many superheroes in this universe now, and Spider-Man's in New York, and I mean, it's not like not everybody's in New York anymore. Like we had it we've had it a lot in the comics, and we don't have the Fantastic Four right now. So you wouldn't have as much of that crossover, but I think doing some team up makes a lot of sense, and occasionally having someone come in and try to bail out Spider-Man, or try to team up with him, or try to make him their sidekick or be his sidekick. That kind of thing happens a lot in the comics and happens a lot in the classic comics. So, I think it would be totally cool to have a lot of interplay with other characters without Spider-Man having to be a team player.
Right, and I hope that it's not like Spider-Man is so bad at this that someone else has to come and save the day at the end. Like, I'm fine with Spider-Man being bad at crime fighting because he generally is. That's kind of like the charm of the character. He's a kid that's in over his head, but
Yeah, and I love that they led with
top,
that.
he's the underdog.
I mean, they introduced him that way. I'm so glad that you and I reviewed a couple of the early comics not too long ago because that stuff is there.
It is, yeah. And that's what I loved about his introduction in the movie so much. So the only characters that I can see really making sense to team up with him are the ones that are based in New York. So I think the Spider-Man movies would be a great way to bring the Netflix characters into the movies and show that they are more interconnected than it seems like they are right now.
Yeah, and I don't think it's going to happen early.
I don't think we're going to get like Daredevil showing up in the first Spider-Man movie, but I think eventually, like, that's the logical place to go. I mean,
it is the logical place to go.
The characters that are Spider-Man's friends, like Matt Murdock and Daredevil, know each other.
Yeah.
Matt Murdock and Peter Parker. I don't know why I said Matt Murdock and Daredevil. That doesn't make sense. Matt Murdock and Peter Parker know each other, and you know, will team up often if there's a threat that they mutually care about and want to take down. You know.
You weren't there for the spoiler cast last night, but this was something we talked about there, and apparently there is still a lot of talk that the folks making the movies don't care about the TV shows. I hope that changes. But, like, right now, there's not really any talk about bringing any of those characters into the movies.
I mean, I don't know. Like, it just seems so strange to me that
I feel like I read an interview with Feige at one point where he said that it was inevitable or it might happen eventually, but it seems like that's not really being talked about as much now. I don't know. If anybody knows of an interview I don't know about, leave it in the comments. But there was a lot of talk about it on the spoiler cast last night.
Yeah, it just seems strange to me. Like, I can see the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. characters because, like, you know, who cares about any of them? But the Netflix characters...
I mean, some people do, but yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'll see them. I will believe them when I see them. I'm sure they exist, but the vast majority of people, I think, can safely say that, like, nobody's chomping at the bit to see the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. characters appear in the movies. I think even a lot of these filmmakers, like, some of them have to be Daredevil fans, right? Like, he's one of the major... I mean, he's always been sort of underground, but if you're a Marvel Comics fan, you know Daredevil, and you've at least read, like, the Frank Miller run, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no. I mean, obviously I'm with you.
Like, who wouldn't? Like, what Marvel filmmaker I'm saying wouldn't be excited to introduce Daredevil in their movie? Like, that's a toy that it's in the same toy box, and you wouldn't want to play with that.
And as I said in the spoiler cast last night, we can't, and I'm afraid they're going to do this. We can't pretend like Hell's Kitchen is that far away from where Peter Parker lives.
No, because it's not.
Because it's not. I mean, we can't do that. But that has such a style all its own that we pretend like it's another city, if not another planet, from even like the rest of New York City. And you know, there's kind of a fun kitschy charm to that, even though like it's a really dark show where it's like here's like a 3 or 5 block radius that's like the edge of hell. And then everything around it is kind of is a lot more safe, and there aren't these crazy street mob politics except for in like a 3-block radius.
And I mean, there's already like some potential connective tissue between the two that makes logical sense. Like, Kingpin was for a long time a Spider-Man villain, and has been a Spider-Man villain in like major television shows.
It would be a huge missed opportunity not to have some of that stuff be, you know, involving each other. At the same time, I also, and I didn't think of this until just now, but I also can't help but wonder if there won't be a little bit of pressure not to go too far down that path in family-friendly Spider-Man things. Because then suddenly all the kids want to go watch Daredevil.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I don't think that, you know, Yeah, I mean, that I suppose maybe that is a good point, because...
I'm not saying that means that they had that bring those characters into the Spider-Man movies suddenly become really dark. It's just, if Kingpin shows up, no matter how he's written and what you do with him, and if he's cool, then now underage people that probably shouldn't be watching Daredevil yet are going to want to go watch Daredevil.
Right, that's true. And the same thing if you bring Matt Murdock into the picture. Yeah, I suppose that's true.
I'm not even saying that that's necessarily a problem, and as I always say, parents should just, you know, pay attention to what their kids are doing and watching, but it might be, that could be the thing that makes them say, yeah, let's not do that.
Yeah, and I suppose maybe they could avoid the problem of him interacting with the Netflix characters if they keep it small scale enough. Like if the Vulture is in fact the villain for the Spider-Man movie, and I'm this probably isn't at all a hint towards it, but like there was a point in Civil War where Falcon goes when his wings get taken. I hope there's going to be no one else out there flying around with those things. I was thinking,
oh wow, maybe so. Yeah. Okay.
I was thinking to myself like, oh, maybe they will connect the Vulture to the Falcon, like everyone was speculating.
I don't know if I misheard you just now. Did you say that you read it is definitely confirmed, or did you say if it is?
If it is. I
okay,
said maybe
yeah.
that's true. Some people have been speculating about that possibly being the case.
Vulture right now seems like let's go ahead and just go there to villain speculation. Vulture does seem like the most natural choice right now.
You think so? I mean, I love the Vulture. Everyone seems to think he's a joke, but like, I think it would be cool, isn't it?
We've had this conversation, about the fact that people think he's a joke. I don't think that would deter them from using him because they can make him really cool. I don't think that, for the most part, these movies have been put together with a lot of strategy of what villain will people think is really cool.
Yeah, that's true.
They always start with the hero, which is how it should be. I mean, sometimes villains end up getting really shafted because of that, which sucks. But it just depends on what kind of story they're telling. You really might be right that that's foreshadowing for that. But you've had all this speculation that maybe that's who Michael Keaton was brought in if he was going to play someone to play. The Vulture was almost the villain in Spider-Man 4 if that had been made. It just seems like the next character that people have heard of that we've never seen on screen before. That I could see
would be the only other one that I
Mysterio.
think people have thrown around, and I'd love to see either of them. I mean, I like both of those characters a lot.
Mysterio, I would get more excited about Vulture, I would get really intrigued about, and would love to see how that was handled. Like, I'm not gonna be like, oh god, Vulture, he's boring and silly. I would love to see Vulture because of the age difference.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that would be really cool. Like,
I want to see a 16-year-old Peter Parker, or what is he, 14 or 15? He's young.
15.
I would love to see do we know for sure? Okay. I would love to see a 15-year-old Peter Parker go up against a 55 to 65 or 70-year-old Vulture.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of been always one of the cool things about Vulture is that he's an age contrast to Peter Parker. There are some stories that do things like that, like especially paralleling the Vulture's age and the fact that he's close to the end of his life with Aunt May. But since Aunt May is a little bit younger in this, I don't know that we'll be able to do stories with them. I'm going to be very intrigued to see if they introduce Osborn in this movie because there's been so many rumors that he's in the movie, and I hope that they do what they were trying to do sort of in Amazing Spider-Man 2, where like seed him and set him up, but just don't put his head in a jar and introduce him in the first movie so we can build up to him by the end and make the Goblin a really terrifying force that we're excited to see by the second or third movie whenever they introduce him.
Yeah, and I mean, I totally understand why you're saying that, because it would be cool to see that finally played out, more traditionally. I also could see not doing it yet just because we've done it twice. And when I say that, I don't mean like necessarily based on what I would want. I just like from a movie making and business standpoint, I could kind of see them saying, "Let's not do that." But I'm not. But I don't know.
It depends.
It just depends on the take. It depends on the tack they take. They could also say, let's try to have the comic book status quo Spider-Man as much as we can from the beginning, which would mean certain characters simply have to be introduced early because they're in that world and they are part of the living and breathing universe of Spider-Man.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it would be very smart to introduce Osborn early, and you could they could do the Spectacular Spider-Man thing that they sort of tried to do with Amazing Spider-Man 2, where the Oscorp is involved in the development of the technology of a lot of the villains. Like maybe the Vulture is a scientist that worked for Oscorp that developed the technology. He gets shafted, and then he wants to go out and destroy Oscorp. And Spider-Man saves the company of the man that eventually would become the Green Goblin. Like Peter Parker's trying to do the right thing, but he makes his life even worse in the process. That's classic Spider-Man kind of stuff.
Dan, I gotta tell you, the more we're talking about this, the more discouraged I'm getting, and it's not because I'm not excited about Homecoming and that I don't think that these movies couldn't be really good and can't be better than anything we've had before. I loved Holland, but everything I'm thinking of that I would love to see can't be done as well as it could be in long form storytelling. In more long form storytelling, I don't want these to be movies. Like, just the more we're talking about, I don't want them to be movies.
Oh, interesting.
Because just everything you're talking about are things that I'm like, yeah, but that would be so much more interesting in a TV show. When you say, we see Osborn, and then eventually he'll become the Green Goblin. Yeah, that's a season of television, not 4 or 5 movies.
I think they could do it in 4 or 5 movies effectively. It depends on how they do it,
They can. It just takes too long. It's just I gotta wait 2 years in between.
I don't know, man. Like, I think they could, they just got the crown jewel of Marvel back. I think Holland's really young. They cast him young on purpose. I think they're gonna keep these Spider-Man movies going for as long as they.
Oh no, they absolutely are. I'm just saying that, like, in a way, because with Spider-Man, I don't really mean this. I just almost wish that I had never seen Daredevil.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I mean, I'd like a TV show more because it's such a serialized story from the very beginning. But I think, like, um, it would be they could do it in the movies effectively. It just depends on, I mean, how interconnected he is with the rest of the Marvel universe, and how the Spider-Man movies are going to have to deal with the fallout of all the other movies, like how involved he is in other things. Like the Spider-Man Homecoming movie has to sort of deal with parts of Civil War because Spider-Man's in it. But, like, is the Spider-Man movie going to have to deal with the fallout of Infinity War? Is the Spider-Man movie after that going to have to deal with the fallout of whatever event movie they come up with? I mean, we don't know at this point. I think if they just stick to, like, telling a Spider-Man story across a span of 3 or 4 movies, it could be great, and just as if
but
not.
But that's part of the problem, right? Is that with so much time in between, how much will the status quo have changed by the time we get to the next one?
Well, I mean, the status quo could change for the larger Marvel universe, but not necessarily for Peter Parker as a character.
Not necessarily. It just, like you said, it just depends on what I mean. Like almost inevitably, if Infinity War is as big as it's likely to be, or whatever they ultimately end up calling that, because they're changing the title.
Right. Yeah.
But, like, if although I still suspect that one of those 2 movies will be called Infinity War. And that they're probably just changing the other one to it. I haven't talked about this yet, but that's what I think they're probably going to do. I think the part thing just confused people, which obviously it did. Like, I thought this would happen. I think one of those will be called Infinity something, and the other one will be called Infinity something else. But anyway, I digress. I just, like, and then also keeping him, like trying to keep him young, like starting at 15. Like, wouldn't it be really cool to tell, like, if I'll get off this, but let me make this last point about it, that, like, if we were able to do this as a Netflix show instead of movies, then you'd be able to tell a lot more story with a younger Peter Parker. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
and
true.
I really wish that we could do that.
I wish we could too.
I'm excited about high school Peter Parker. What's interesting is they keep talking about it like they want to keep him in high school for as long as they can, and I'm like, well, you're not going to get more than 3 or 4 movies out of that.
Yeah, and I think if we do 3 or 4 movies, I mean, if they span like a year of Peter Parker's life, I mean, that's the 4 years of high school and move to college eventually.
Yeah, but the thing is, that would be great, except that then, and, like, they could change their tack on this if they wanted to. But so far, all of these movies have happened in 8 years of real time.
Mm-hmm. True. Yeah.
Now, I mean, the TV shows haven't. Like Daredevil and Jessica Jones, and then Daredevil season 2 are not in real time. Those seem to take place within maybe a few months of each other, all of them. But we've been living with that now for a year and a half. So, like, there's precedent now. If you look at the TV shows, I don't know that will actually mean anything for the movies. But, like, I like your idea, Dan, and then you wouldn't have to worry about the larger Marvel universe, because you just keep going back in time for Spider-Man for at least a few movies.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that you necessarily have to go back in time. Like, it depends on how long it takes between these. I mean, I guess maybe they wouldn't be able to get.
But you'd have to put one out every year if you did that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
The only way it would work is if they suddenly decided that now we're going to truncate the timeline and have only 6 months pass in our continuity in the 3 or 4 years it takes to put movies out. And I don't think they're going to do that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they treat that 8 years line in Civil War as definitive as a definitive measure of that. I have a feeling it might be a little bit more fluid, but we'll
I don't
see.
see how. I mean, it's not a line; it's a date on a tombstone.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? I mean, we know what the year is, and we knew what the year was in Iron Man.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, unless they just ignore that stuff, I mean, like, we have physical proof of how long it's been between those movies.
Right. Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. I mean, if you don't want to, take that, like, if you want to take that with a grain of salt, okay, but that would be really strange.
Yeah, I agree. It would be strange.
It wouldn't be Doctor Strange, but it would be strange. Okay. What else should we be talking about? What is the supporting cast going to look like?
The supporting cast we know so far, no one has been cast as any of the comic book supporting cast besides Aunt May. There was a young Disney Channel actress that was cast as a character named Michelle. There was a couple of other actors that were cast as male supporting cast members, and then they weren't named anyone from the comics either. So I don't know how much we're going to get in this initial movie of the like mainstay Spider-Man supporting cast, because most of them that we think of don't really show up till Peter's in college. Like, we see Flash Thompson and Liz Allen very early on when Peter's in high school. We meet Betty Brant when Peter's in high school, but he doesn't meet Harry or Mary Jane or Gwen until he gets to college. So I'm kind of not surprised that they're not in this initially if they're gonna like follow the comics. But it'll be interesting to see like how long it takes us to get there, because certainly they could change it and say like, oh, Mary Jane is younger now, like she was in Ultimate and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I don't mean to say that I'm resisting you when you say that you'd really like to see Osborn there from the beginning, but especially with the high school kids, I think it would be really smart, and I really imagine, especially with your saying that they've cast people with names we've never heard of, I really imagine that they're gonna avoid too many people making too many comparisons to other versions of live action characters we've seen already.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think they're gonna want to make this feel as fresh and new and set apart as possible. So they're not gonna want a lot of characters we've seen in their incarnation before, because everybody's just going to compare them to the last versions we've seen.
Yeah,
You're seeing that all anybody wants to talk about is that Aunt May is young now.
Yeah, I think Osborn's a little bit of a different case though, because we didn't really get much of him in the last trilogy, and he was only in one of the Raimi movies. It's not
right.
like,
and you're right about it with Osborn, but beyond that, I don't like. I think it would be really smart for most of that supporting. I mean, I don't know how you don't have Harry Osborn there for the beginning.
Yeah, especially if Osborn's there, he would have to meet Harry.
You kind of have to do that because they should be in high school and best friends from the beginning.
Well, yeah, I mean they meet in college in the comics, but
that's right. Okay, well maybe they'll do that, but I would be surprised.
Yeah, I mean
I forgot about that.
Yeah, I mean, and Harry and Peter have a sort of antagonistic relationship at the beginning. Like, Harry doesn't like most of the kids that Peter interacts with in high school and college in general don't like him because he's sort of standoffish and his mind is always elsewhere, and they like try to invite him to hang out places and he's like, no, leave me alone, my aunt's like dying and I have to go fight supervillains. And they're like, what's wrong with this guy? And Harry and Peter have a similar sort of relationship at first until they Peter opens up and Harry realizes that he's a kind person. And same thing with Gwen too. A lot of the supporting cast members have a pretty low opinion of him and poor first impression when they meet him. So I could see Harry being introduced as, a kid that goes to a private school or a charter school in like New York City or something that Peter meets like when he goes to Oscorp buildings and they don't get along at first or something. And then, maybe we reintroduce Harry when Peter goes to college or something. I don't know.
Can I make a radical prediction?
Sure.
Feel free to say that's really ridiculous. They won't do that. But there was so much talk, and this was wishful thinking from people, I think, but there was so much talk to the point of people almost wanting to boycott this movie if it used Peter Parker, that it had to be Miles Morales instead. You remember that? Like, there were so many people saying, I really don't even want to be Peter Parker anymore. I want Miles Morales. My wild prediction is that Miles Morales goes to that high school.
Oh, that'd be interesting. I don't really want the world of multiple Spider-Men, but
I think it's really likely.
Oh,
And
well.
part of the reason I say that is they're starting from sort of this like really early pure comic book place. I say sort of because of course we're taking some liberties. We've got a young Aunt May, and there might be other things that they're taking major liberties with. But they're doing a 15-year-old Peter Parker. I can. I really feel like eventually they're likely, and maybe it won't take too long, to go to that multiple Spider-Man place just because that's been so popular in other media lately.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put them past them. I really hope it doesn't happen. I mean, not that I dislike Miles Morales, but I like Peter Parker, to an infinite degree more.
But this video is about speculation. Is about things that we want to see happen and just speculation, Dan.
Right.
Like I may not want that. I think they'll do that.
Yeah, I hope they don't though.
Like I like. Well,
What'd you say? Sorry, I cut out for a second.
No. I'm about to sneeze. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. I I like Miles Morales a lot. There's a part of me that really would like to see him in the movies, but then I don't know that I want multiple Spider-Man either, or Spider-Man either.
Yeah, I think establishing your new Spider-Man in this continuity, I would hope that they'd want to keep it focused on his character before they start introducing characters that will eventually be spider-powered characters down the line. At least I would hope, but maybe they could make him the Scarlet Spider or something eventually. That would be in the movies. I don't know.
I mean, like they could make him, a kid that is like friends with Peter Parker at some point or something, and then eventually do something like that with him. I don't know. I'm just saying I could kind of see it as like a cameo thing where like he walks by and we find out that that's Miles Morales. Like,
Yeah, a lot of people I saw online were kind of speculating that Miles Morales would be in the Netflix universe because Foggy has some throwaway line about talking to Morales. I didn't catch that in the second season of Daredevil. I don't know what the context is, but I saw people talking about it. So
I doubt very seriously that was intended.
as do I. Yeah.
Morales is such a popular throwaway last name for like police officers.
Yes, it is. You're right.
There are so many like whenever you have like a Hispanic official, like I'd say it's Morales like 30% of the time. like I hear that all the time in like police procedurals and stuff.
Right.
So I don't know. It's difficult as a comic fan though to not make those connections because so often they are intended Easter eggs.
Right. Exactly.
And you can't help but watch for them because these things ask you to watch for them.
Yes, that's right.
So much of the time. I mean, there are people now on YouTube that make a living. And I'm not talking about us, about me. Like, there are people online that make a living just going through finding all the Easter eggs and making videos about them.
Yeah, that's true. And, a lot of those people are pretty insightful. Like, there's stuff that, I wouldn't notice for some of the characters that I have nothing, I have no knowledge about.
And, like, sometimes those things will seem really, really reaching, but then sometimes you'll wonder, like, even with the things where you're like, I don't know, that's a stretch. But then these things are so often planted.
Right, exactly. I mean,
in many things.
Especially that since we've got people that are such big fans of this stuff making them now, like in the mid 2000s where it was kind of like, we got people who maybe they had read some of the comics before but they weren't necessarily like movies being produced by people that have read swaths of the comic books. Like stuff like that could be reaching in those movies, but you look at the stuff today, you're like anything could be planted to be a tease to the fans and stuff.
So speaking of stretching and reading way too far into things, I'd like to try to extrapolate a little bit of speculation from the title about what the movie might be about. So the thing is called Homecoming. You can't tell me that you're not going to have a high school homecoming.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Okay, so homecomings are in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And that gives you the potential to do some, like, stuff around Halloween with Spider-Man.
That would be cool.
And that might be a neat setting. I wouldn't mind seeing as maybe even a supporting villain or a one or two scene villain, Jack-o'-lantern.
That would be interesting. Yeah.
I just thought of that because you could do the whole you can have like a whole scarecrow motif, and like there's a lot of neat settings you could do around that time of the year.
Yeah, you could have someone steal like a prototype of the Goblin Glider from Oscorp or something.
Yeah, or
sort
you
of like
just have
would be Jack-o'-lantern.
You can just have a crazy bad guy in the middle of a parade that Spider-Man has to fight. That got a flaming jack-o'-lantern hat. I mean, we don't have to get high tech with everything.
That's true. Yeah.
But yeah, I wonder how that title will play as a double entendre for the film itself, because like obviously there's the connotation of Spider-Man going back to Marvel, and I imagine again it will take place during the homecoming season of the school, and you'll probably have a fight in a football stadium or something. I mean, I imagine I'm kind of seeing this play in my head. I imagine that kind of stuff will happen. But for Spider-Man himself, he's already home. I wonder what the title's going to mean.
You think it'll take place directly after Civil War, like after Tony tells him to go home, and we'll see him like, right? Well, we see in the post-credit scene like him having the spider signal on his web shooter, and that's like right after he had got home from the battle and stuff. But maybe the movie picks up right after that scene or something.
Maybe so, but I would be really surprised if that title didn't have like a larger. And again, I don't mean to read too far into this, but like that sounds like too intriguing of a title to not do something larger with it, as far as whatever Peter Parker's ultimate character arc would be. Like when I hear a title like Homecoming, I imagine a character who starts at a place where he doesn't feel like he's at home, and at the end is at home.
Yeah, you would hope so.
And I don't know what that means for a character that already lives where he's going to live.
Well, Peter Parker's a character that never really fits in anywhere, and in that way, he's similar to what Cap echoes at the end of the movie when he's writing that letter to Tony Stark about how he felt like he never fit in anywhere either.
What you hope then is that or at least what we hope, because we are anti-Spider-Man being an Avenger, even though people think that we're crazy for saying that. What you hope it doesn't mean is that where Spider-Man really belongs is with all the other superheroes, and he learns it by the end and goes there.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
That's what it could be, that, and then Dan will be upset and throw popcorn.
Yeah, I will, because I'm right. Spider-Man was never on a team for like 40 years of his history. I don't think it works.
Spider Dan Torrey is going to throw popcorn at the screen, you guys.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it depends on how they do it. If they make a creative choice that I'm not necessarily pleased with, but they make it work within the context of the story they're telling, like I'll appreciate that.
But do you agree that that's not an implausible thing?
No, I mean I think that's totally plausible.
So, anyway, that's a possible thing. What else would you like to speculate about, Dan?
I'm trying to think. Do you think we'll get any flashbacks at all to the origin, or they'll like avoid that kind of stuff completely?
I feel like I honestly think you could avoid it too much if you're not careful.
I think we'll at least get flashbacks of Uncle Ben like talking to Peter. I don't think we'll actually see him get shot and killed.
I think it's really important that you have screen time with those two characters, and that at the very least we understand who Peter was before he learned the responsibility lesson. I think you have to have that. I mean, you have really turned me around, Dan, on the and to its credit, even though people don't like this movie, the first Amazing Spider-Man movie did a lot of work for me for this too, for all the reasons that I described in my rewind. That is a real story if you tell it right. And that there is a real coming of age lesson there, and the Peter Parker who he was before he was responsible and afterwards. And I always love this idea that Peter Parker, if it weren't for Uncle Ben, would have been probably just another lame costumed supervillain running around New York.
Yeah, exactly. I'm with you. I think seeing Uncle Ben is a necessity, and I know people will sort of like, if they show anything close to like the robber coming in and Uncle Ben being shot, people will like, oh my god, we're seeing this again, and this is stupid. I'm one of the people that, like you said, thinks Spider-Man's origin is one of the best stories ever told with the character, so that never really bothers me, and I think it's essential to understanding who the character is. But at this point, I think having the flashbacks with Uncle Ben would be perfectly fine, and sort of treating it how like they did it in Spectacular Spider-Man, where there are flashbacks to Ben teaching him the lesson, and Peter taking that lesson to heart, and some situations where Uncle Ben like consoles him after he tries to like fight someone in high school or something like. I don't know if that happens verbatim in Spectacular, but something to that effect, right? I think at least just establishing what the relationship between those two characters is very important, especially since the Aunt May's a little bit younger in this, and I'd like to get a sense of how different their Uncle Ben is compared to the other versions we've seen.
Yeah, just because of that alone, I feel like we need to see it. But also, just basic tenets of storytelling. It doesn't matter that I've already seen the origin as many times or more as Dan and I have made speculation videos about Spider-Man movies. I need to see him just basic storytelling stuff to appreciate how Peter Parker feels about him. I wish somehow or rather I could have had I could have had some actual real interaction somewhere with Tony Stark and his mother, and his mother. I didn't have a real good vocal inflection there. Because of the way he goes after Bucky at the end of Civil War, and some of that's just like the writer in me, where I was always trained like you give characters like even though a person is going to care about their mother, you give characters a little bit of screen time so that a person can get in that character's head and care about the person that they care about. It's an excuse that I'm coming around on it. It works okay. I'm just saying that, and I don't know how you could have possibly done it. But in this particular case, it's going to be easier to actually do those sorts of flashbacks and have some stuff with Uncle Ben. And you know how anti-flashback I am, but there's no other way to do it because we're not going to do the origin movie. I think that people have a tendency to oversimplify this a little bit. Where I've said forever, and I said before Amazing Spider-Man, one of the first things, the big deal for me with rebooting it that early was please don't be another origin. Well, it was. It was a better origin in my mind. It's not. I don't like the third act. I don't like the big giant lizard plot. But as far as just the origin story, it's a better origin. So I'm glad. I'm now kind of glad that we had it. But there's a difference between doing that whole story again that we've seen before and remembering that you were making a piece that has to stand alone regardless of what people already know.
Right. I'm hoping that the way they kind of handle it from a filmmaking standpoint is do it as a flashback kind of thing before we get the Marvel logo, like they did with the Bucky flashback at the beginning of Civil War. Like have a small, like clearly, a memory of Peter's of Uncle Ben, like some sort of situation they're in, and he tells him the lesson, and then we,
But even if you do that,
from there.
It doesn't. But even if you do that, I don't think that it would be fair to immediately cry foul if we ever did it again.
No, definitely not.
And again, like I feel like I'm contradicting myself a little bit from things I've said in the past. But like I love to do these sorts of things sometimes outside of flashbacks. But I don't want another whole origin movie, and yet I have to kind of appreciate Uncle Ben as not just being a plot device. He has to be a real character, even though he's dead.
Yeah, and that's one of the big things that I always praise Ultimate Spider-Man for is that, Uncle Ben becomes a real fleshed out character and you understand his relationship with Peter much better because that's a 6-issue version of Peter's origin story rather than a, 22-page one. Or I don't think the origin in Amazing Fantasy 15 is even 20 pages. I don't remember the exact page count off the top of my head, but it's shorter anyway.
You know what they should do, Dan?
What should they do?
Tony Stark has this ongoing evolution of his holographic technology, where we've really developed that over several movies. Where every movie he's got better and better holograms. What he should do is he should give at some point Peter Parker a gift, which is like an AI of Uncle Ben as a hologram, and then Peter Parker talks to him like Superman and Jor-El. That's how you fix that problem.
That's how we'll introduce the Peter Parker's parent androids from the 90s. They're totally going to do that.
And then we have a giant fight between the android parents and Vision. Be awesome. No, I'm totally kidding. I want to talk about something that I just thought of this, and I'm glad I did, because I really want to pick your brain about this. Something that Eric and I talked about on the phone last night, because we did our spoiler cast, and then we talked even more about that movie. One of the things that Eric said he's got reservations about with Spider-Man, and of course I should mention that some of our panelists really disliked choices for Spider-Man, and Dan and I are both liked it a lot more than some of our panelists did. One of the things that Eric is a little bit worried about is that they, and I understand this, is that Peter Parker might be played up as too much of a super genius. That he really shouldn't be like Tony Stark level or Reed Richards level super genius. And I don't think there's really anything in that movie to make you think that they're going to go too far with that necessarily. But it is potentially a concern, and I want to ask you how you feel about like super genius Peter Parker, because I'm kind of with him. I think sometimes we forget that there's a difference between a genius and a super genius, and I think Peter Parker is like a regular run-of-the-mill genius.
That's such a funny word, run-of-the-mill genius.
Right? Well, the reason I say that is because like I have known geniuses. IQ wise, my stepfather, the Jeff, he's been on several of our videos. He's a master pianist. He's been playing the piano since he was like 5 or 6. He's a master organist. He checks out on an IQ score as a genius. We know geniuses. They're relatively common. I mean, like, not common, but you know what I mean. So he can be a genius, but should he be a super genius?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that he'll be a super genius necessarily based on what we see in the movie. Like, I think the reason why he's able to build the web shooters and stuff, obviously, is because he picks apart old technology and stuff like that, so he would know at least to some degree how technology works and stuff. One of my favorite things about Peter Parker in this movie in general is an aside, but I love that he has like old wonky technology that like looks like Steve Ditko drew it in his room, just like the early comics. And that computer on his desk looks a lot like the computer that Peter has in the 90s animated series, which is really awesome.
Well, and it's funny that you say wonky technology, because like that I know actually what kind of computer that is.
Oh, cool.
That is because my stepdad used to have one of those. I'm pretty sure that's an old Mac Plus, although it might be even. Is there anything before Mac? I think it might even be the thing before that. But that's like,
I don't know much about the history of computers, so you would know more than I. I'm not sure.
I know for sure that that's an early Mac. Almost positive. I mean, just the shape of it. Like that's an early. Now, I don't think he turns it on, so we don't get to see the operating system. But that's a Mac Plus. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so
it's like circa 82, 83.
Yeah,
somewhere
so
around there. I think. Correct me if in the comments if anybody knows exactly what model that is, but I'm pretty sure that was a Mac Plus.
Yeah, so we know he like tinkers with that stuff, and if they go with the comic book kind of his interest in science and chemistry and stuff, like that's where his knowledge about the web fluid comes from. I mean, I don't know where you draw the line. Like, what would you quantify a super genius as someone who can build web shooters and like make web fluid in his room? Like, if that constitutes.
No, I don't think so. I would call that an inventor, Dan. Like, I think that's fine. He needs to not be able to make the Pym particle. I think that's where you draw the line.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah.
That sort of thing. I think he needs to not be a Hank Pym.
Yeah, and like Peter Parker, at least how he's been played in a lot of the comics recently, which I don't know how I feel about, is the fact that like he has the potential to do these sorts of things that the other like really smart characters have, but he just doesn't have the resources. I mean, I can see that maybe as a take on him, but I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it.
Here's the thing. I can see that maybe as a take on him later on, and that's what becomes problematic about, not to get too much into the comics, that's what becomes kind of problematic about Dan Slott, because we've sort of like as you always say, we de-aged him and then we've stuck him in an age. But like, I think maybe a 30, 35, 40-year-old Peter Parker could eventually get there. Maybe. but I don't want him to start out there necessarily.
Oh no, definitely not. Definitely not. I agree.
Now you've got like the born super geniuses. I just don't feel like Peter Parker's ever, or at least I don't know if there's such a thing as a definitive version. Stan Lee's Peter Parker was not a born.
No, you're right. He wasn't.
He's a smart guy, but he's a smart guy in like the conventional sense, where like he reads a lot and he likes science and he studies it, but I don't think he's like a prodigy.
The Peter Parker of the comic books, I think this is the difference between like him and Reed Richards. Reed Richards is like a born prodigy. Peter Parker works really hard.
Yeah, and he talks about how he has to work hard. And like I'll put it this way: and they nailed this particular thing, I think, in the Raimi movies, where Peter Parker doesn't go to class and doesn't get papers written and gets D's and F's and almost flunks out of college. Reed Richards, if he was in the same boat, would not almost flunk out of college.
That's right. Yeah, you're right.
I think that's kind of the distinction.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I think they played that sort of work ethic thing up in the little scenes we got with Peter Parker in Civil War, like the conversation he has with Tony. You kind of get the sense that that's what he's all about.
Oh yeah, and he's worried about missing a test, and he's like, I can't just uproot myself because I've got to go to school and I have homework and stuff. And like, again, a super genius wouldn't be as worried about that. He'd do his homework on the airplane.
Right. Or already have it done.
Yeah, exactly. Dan, we are right at 1 hour. Final thoughts, anything we didn't cover that we want to speculate about? And I guess we haven't really been talking so much about the grand future. I guess a little bit, mostly just about this next movie. But anything else that you wanted to mention? Any other like villain ideas or predictions you want to throw out? We did some of that, but I feel like we were pretty thorough.
I'm just going to be interested to see like what they do with the Rogues Gallery. I hope that we get we do justice to Spider-Man's rogues. I mean, in that batch of rumors I was talking about that came out like yesterday or earlier today, I forget. Like it's relatively recent. The rumor about like Osborn being in the movie and the Vulture being the main villain. There's the other rumor was that the Jackal was going to be introduced too, and Miles Warren is one of Peter's teachers in the comics in college.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe Miles Warren is one of Peter Parker's high school teachers. Maybe they eventually go to the clone stuff. Like there's just so many things that so many different villains they could introduce and do different things and improve on stories. Like I would love if we got a movie that was like an improved and good version of the Clone Saga. I mean that would be a really bold move of them, and I think it would be kind of cool to see them redo that story in a movie and make it good.
But it's another thing that you kind of want to get 3 or 4 movies down the line before you got that.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying in this movie initially. I'm talking about...
No, I know. I'm just saying that it's interesting that a lot of the things we'd like to see...
I think it would be cool to see like down the line.
What's weird about it is I have a hard time saying like what I really want to see in the first couple, because all the things I'm excited about are things that you have to wait for.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what's so weird about it. Honestly, well, let me say this first. You brought up the Jackal. Mad science has been a thing that has really connected a lot of these movies together. And mad science has been a big thing in Spider-Man comics especially. So, foregone conclusion that you've got some kind of crazy genetic tinkering stuff that happens in a Spider-Man thing.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I also am weirdly almost more excited with Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery to get to see some of our other superheroes fight them.
Oh yeah, like who are you thinking they should like pair with and stuff? I'm curious. Like, what matchups would you like to see?
Well, you know what I see, and as soon as I said that, I was like, I should have thought that out before I said that to Dan. I want to see Sinister Six against the Avengers.
That would be interesting.
Like why not? I would love to see that. Yeah, I'd love to see Doc Ock go up against, somebody like Captain America.
Matt Fraction had a really great story in his run on Iron Man, pitting Tony Stark and Dr. Octopus against each other, and I thought it was really good.
Like the thing is I've said this a lot. My favorite villains in the Marvel universe have always been Spider-Man villains. One of the reasons I've always been,
in my humble opinion.
One of the reasons I've always been more of a Batman guy than anything is because I love the Rogues Gallery, and a lot of people are that way. It's a cliche thing to say, but I really like a lot of Spider-Man's rogues, even though some of them are kind of one note and just like thugs that work for other people. But that's kind of a motif with those that can be fun, and you can also still flesh them out. I think the Flash rogues are exactly that way too, and I'd kind of like to see, like I said, just some of those like those are my favorite villains. So I want them to show up in other people's movies too. That's something I always enjoyed in Spider-Man comics. It's like, like the Shocker or someone shows up, but it's not a Spider-Man comic. It's like it's somebody else. He's going up against Captain America, or he's going up against, I don't know, Daredevil, or whoever it is.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's always fun. And the thing is, when you said that, I was sitting here thinking, like, what matchups have I seen in the comics? Well, a lot of it's X-Men, and a lot of it's Daredevil. So like, I haven't seen a lot of the Avengers that we're actually deal with some of these villains, and I don't want to like go back on what I just said, but then I guess kind of the problem with it is that, so that we don't get too big, of course, right away, the Spider-Man's villains are kind of designed to be villains that he can fight on his own. So ergo, they'd be too easy for some of the Avengers to take out.
Right, and I hope that we go comic book with a lot of the villains in terms of their looks and powers and stuff.
Me too.
Because some of the Spider-Man Rogues Galleries costumes are so cool. Like, I want us to finally get the Green Goblin right in a movie. He needs to look cool. I know I've been talking about Osborn a lot, but he's my favorite. So
well, can I suggest that's another good reason to set this around Halloween?
That's true, yeah.
Because if you put him in something that looks more like the Green Goblin suit from well, two things. But first of all, if you put it in the right setting, it doesn't look as silly. Because people have always been worried that, like, you pull that off the page and you can't make it menacing, you can't make it scary. It's scary because it's weird and it's out of time, and it's just the audacity that someone would put that on and then get on a glider and fly around and shoot things. But like, I've always thought that Hobgoblin is even scarier. Like he actually has sometimes a legitimately freaky costume. Let me also say, I want Hobgoblin. I don't mean first like the 90s Spider-Man show did it, but I eventually really want Hobgoblin.
Yeah, Hobgoblin would be great. I mean, even I have to admit, aesthetically, Hobgoblin does have the cooler looking costume. Like, I think you can objectively say that Hobgoblin has a better costume than Green Goblin. But I like Green Goblins better because I love Osborn so much, and I love the color purple. So I would want to see them do something. I don't know if you've ever seen like the costume that Osborn wore when he was leading the Thunderbolts. They redesigned it a little bit, and it had like the scale mail look to it, like Captain America's comic book costume on like the purple parts. So it looked a little bit more like not a guy in a green jumpsuit with purple booties and and like a weird purple thing over it.
Yeah,
like it looked a little bit more menacing and scary. So I think if you went with something like that, I mean, I want to eventually going down the line see Kraven the Hunter done really well. I don't. The tough thing with Spider-Man in the MCU though is like Kraven's best story is really dark.
Yeah,
and I don't know that we'd be.
That's why it should be in a Netflix show, Dan. Oh.
Yeah.
That one especially. But yeah, the other thing I was going to say, and to your point that you just made, is that also Marvel Cinematic has taken costumes that people would never have thought you could take off the page and make work and make them work. And we did Loki. And it just makes me think that, like, I think you do redesign that suit some, but I think you can make it pretty authentic and still make it kind of freaky if you do it right. It doesn't have to be the Power Rangers mask. Like, you can do something creepy.
Right, exactly. And I think it'll be interesting to see, like, what they do with all of them. Like, will we get Fishbowl Head Mysterio? I hope so.
You can't do Mysterio and not have the fishbowl head. And the thing is, you can do that and make it really creepy. Again, like, that's not... Here's the thing. That is inherently silly and inherently scary all at the same time. And what I love about it is that I think, and I'm partly saying that because I've read Kevin Smith's Mysterio, and that right. Stuff is just awesome. And Mysterio is silly in the comics also, like the look of it, like when Spider-Man calls him Fishbowl Head, he's always making fun. He does this with all of his villains, but he's always making fun of him. So that's not a thing that, like Green Goblin, is an aesthetic that works in comics in a way it doesn't work on film. I think Mysterio works just as well on film, and I don't think that it's. I mean, like, if you could do a good live-action Mr. Free suit,
that's true. Yeah.
I think you could do a good Fishbowl Head, and he's so often he's like in fog and like. Does mirrors and stuff anyway, that, like, I think the way you do... See, I always only want to call him Fishbowl Head. I think the way you do Mysterio is that he's secluded a lot, and he's pretending to be other people a lot. He's using holographic technology. Maybe he steals stuff from Stark. I don't know, but like he uses holographic technology, and he keeps pretending to be other people. So I don't think you see the fishbowl all that often.
I think Mysterio, to your point earlier about the Halloween theme, would be also a really good villain to put in that setting.
I think what we're discovering is something that is inherent in Spider-Man and on accident, is that he's got a lot of villains that look good at Halloween.
Yeah, you're right. I never thought.
I mean, but like Hobgoblin, Green Goblin, Mysterio, the Jack-o'-lantern, Kraven the Hunter. Even these are all characters that look really good in the fall.
Yeah, that's.
And that makes me think that if I can read that far into it and say Homecoming is going to be a movie with a fall aesthetic, any of the characters I just mentioned are easily fair game.
That would be awesome.
Well, besides Hobgoblin, because you shouldn't do him first. But I'm just saying.
Yeah.
And I don't see them doing a full blown Green Goblin in their first movie. I don't see that.
No, I agree with you. I think they'll save him, which is good because Green Goblin is a villain that's always built up towards in the comics, and when he shows up, it's always a treat because we're always building towards him, and there's large mysteries surrounding his plots always. So I hope they do something like that with it. The only major villain that I want to see in the first movie that we haven't talked about, and we kind of discussed this when we did our Spider-Man page by page, is you never really think of him as a major villain of the Spider-Man Rogues Gallery, but he kind of is J. Jonah Jameson. Yeah. I really want to see him in this.
But that seems like a no-brainer. Like I'm just gonna say it. He will be there.
Yeah, I hope so.
Like I don't see them skimping out on that. That seemed like a blatant choice in the Amazing movies where like, well, that's been done and it's been done really well and we're going to save it and not do it. Because we didn't do it last time, they'll do it this time.
I hope so. And I'm going to be very interested to see who they cast as him. And I think Spider-Man being involved in the airport thing in Civil War, if there's someone there that got a photo of him, that will serve as the impetus for the public disliking him.
It could, but no one was there.
That we know of? I mean, they say the airport was evacuated, so there was people there right before the fight started.
Yeah, I don't know that I would love it if they retroactively were like, and then here's this person that saw the whole fight and was like underneath a cart or something. But they could do that, I guess. Yeah,
I mean, I don't know. I think having Spider-Man be there with like a band of government sanctioned agents that like were supposed to bring superheroes in, and it devolved into this even more destructive conflict. Like I don't know. I think that's a pretty good impetus for people not liking someone publicly.
I think so too. I do agree with you from conversations we've had before this with certain other people that don't like Spider-Man in that movie as much as we do. That I don't think. It's going to be harder just because Tony Stark had Spider-Man work with him to make Spider-Man unliked.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think that's going to be a difficult thing.
This is the United States of America, and a lot of people don't like our government around here.
but even beyond that, I don't think anybody's going to know he was that he was working with Tony Stark, and that's why I kind of sort of hope that they don't go that way. Like, I don't want Spider-Man's introduction to the public beyond the YouTube thing to be like he's government sanctioned and all of that. Like, I think they intentionally, for a number of reasons, they had that airport scene be secluded, but I think one of the reasons was to intentionally make it so that Spider-Man could be involved in that and still be introduced to the world in his own way in his own movie. I don't think that's going to play into that at all.
I think it will, just because the introduction was in that movie very specifically, and these movies like to build on each other. I think
we'll see who's right on this, because this is a place that I'm going to vehemently disagree with you. I don't think they'll do that.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I don't know if that'll be specifically how they introduce him. I mean, they could do the sort of thing like when he breaks from Stark. Jameson is a guy that agrees with Stark and sees Spider-Man going off and doing rogue things not sanctioned by the government.
Yeah.
And that's the reason he hates him. I think it's what Spider-Man, the situation surrounding his introduction, I think will affect Jameson's opinion of him and therefore how the public perceives him.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see which of us is right on that.
Yeah.
Do you think this is the last thing I'll say? With and I'm glad you brought up Jameson because I forgot to mention that. Let me tack this on here real quick too. I also really like the Chameleon.
Yeah, the Chameleon would be great. I mean, he's one of the first Spider-Man villains too. So if they brought him in, that'd be keeping in tradition. And the Vulture is certainly one of the first villains too. But
you could do a really cool, like a mistaken identity plot.
Yeah, and Mysterio stories are often about mistaken identity as well.
Right. I thought of that. Well, and that's why I said I think that we'll see a lot of different actors play Mysterio.
Oh yeah, that would be awesome.
In his if he's introduced, he'll be like Mystique.
That would be cool. Yeah.
Only not an attractive actress that's painted up in blue. I mean,
at least you hope not.
I mean, they could do that with Mysterio. I guess it's very theatrical. It's theatrical makeup. See, but anyway, with J. Jonah Jameson, would you agree, especially with if you take Daredevil into account, that you have to update J. Jonah Jameson to the newspaper thing? It can't be a newspaper mogul thing. We've already in Daredevil done a traditional newspaper that's not making it hardly. I think that he could be an unsuccessful one, but if you want that paper to actually be like work, I think it's gotta be very like online and connected and not traditional newspaper.
No, I agree with you. I think the new J. Jonah Jameson, he kind of starts out like this in the comics. He's the owner of like a kind of seedy gossip mag. And I think there's online equivalents of that today. Like, it doesn't necessarily need to be like a celebrity news thing. Like, it could just be like a seedy news website that goes for clickbait and stuff. And maybe that's like it could be like a BuzzFeed sort of thing, like a really popular website that's
that's great. I like that a lot. Well, I'll tell you what I would love to see. There is a way you could sort of do it more traditionally, and maybe even still have an online presence. But I wouldn't mind it being what I always thought people should have seen it as, but for whatever reason they didn't. I think it should be like a tabloid.
Yeah, like the National Enquirer.
Yeah, he should be running like the National Enquirer because, like, for somehow or rather, he just makes up things, puts it on the front of a newspaper, and people think it's a credible newspaper.
Yeah, that's true.
And I mean, I realize that like, not to get political, but I realize that some people are probably thinking, well, yeah, real newspapers do that all the time. But like, what he's running is a bona fide tabloid.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. I mean, like in what is it, Spider-Man 2 or Spider-Man 3, I forget, where he's like food scare. And he's like, yeah, I'm a little gassy, and he just puts it on the front page. He's just making things up. He's like, I think I might have gotten food poisoning. I need something for the front page. Food scare. Let's pretend like it's an epidemic. That's a tabloid.
Yeah, it is.
So I would love to see it just be a straight-up tabloid. But then the problem is, if he's not actually influential and nobody takes it seriously, then he can't turn people against Spider-Man. And that's the reason it was never an actual tabloid.
Right, and
maybe I'm wrong.
He kind of starts out as the seedy gossip mag owner, and then eventually, they change it to the Daily Bugle. At some point, like he kind of like moves his way up in the media world. They don't like actually show that, but
I think it's kind of a bona fide retcon. But
yeah it is. Pretty much, from what I remember. I'm gonna have to go back and look at those now that I'm talking about it.
We should at some point bring that show back and actually review those issue to issue, and then we would get there, because just the first couple we did has informed so much of just what I want to see in this movie. We really need to continue that show if we can find time to do it.
Yeah. You know what would be really cool?
Maybe not make them an hour long.
Yeah. You know, it'd be really cool if J. Jonah Jameson used to be like a successful newspaper mogul, and then got out of the business because he found that it wasn't profitable and started up one of those like BuzzFeed type websites in order to keep making money.
That'd be great. And then you could have like somebody who knows him really well at some point come in and be like, remember when you were a respectable journalist? And
yeah, exactly.
You could use Robbie that way, where like Robbie stayed with him.
Yeah, I'd love if they.
Wouldn't that be great? Where like Robbie stays with them because they've always been friends and maybe they're even partners or something, and but he doesn't like what he's turned into, and like he stays there but he hates it. That'd be really cool.
I wish I would love if they did more stuff with Robbie, because he's one of my favorite supporting characters from the Spider-Man large supporting cast. I love Robbie Robertson. I was pleased to see him in the Raimi movies, but he didn't really get much to do in those.
He didn't. He was just there.
Cool, but,
well cast, but he was just kind of there. The other reason I say, and I mean, I could be wrong about this, they might not do this, but the other reason I feel like it's almost a foregone conclusion that he'll be there is because, to your point with Robbie, just too much of the main Spider-Man supporting cast is introduced to that newspaper. I just don't see them not starting with that, especially because they've avoided, if memory serves, Daily Bugle in Daredevil. They've been saving that.
That's right, yeah. I mean, it's called the Daily Bulletin in Daredevil, right?
Although, is it the
New York Bulletin? That's what it is.
It's this, yeah, New York Bulletin, which I think is also a Marvel newspaper. But I'm not sure if I'm right about that. But anyway,
I'm not sure either. Now that you say that.
So my timetable is starting to get kind of screwed up because the last couple of years have gone by in my head in like 4 months. But did the first season of Daredevil get made? It did, didn't it? Before this deal happened with Sony.
Yes, it did.
So at that point, they couldn't have used the Daily Bugle.
And I wish they could have, because Ben Urich, of course, is a long time Daily Bugle reporter in the comics.
But the nice thing is, now you can have that newspaper be separate from Daredevil, and then have it be like a rival newspaper.
That's true, yeah.
And that's good because like Spider-Man's not in Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be interested to see what they do love interest wise in this movie. We haven't
talked about that at all. I said final thoughts 20 minutes ago, but you're right. We need to talk about that.
Yeah, because that's such an important part of the Spider-Man stories is the romance aspect of it.
Right.
I have a feeling that we're not going to get any of the major love interests in the sense that Peter's going to be like dating them and stuff.
Is it possible that this is a movie that doesn't have one?
Yeah, it would be interesting.
Like at all.
At the very least, if the homecoming dance is in the movie, he's going to have to take someone to it.
But maybe they just never quite get to that place where like maybe he's. I could see this. I could see his best. I could see them doing the kid whose best friend is a girl and they've never thought of each other that way, and then they do later.
Right. Yeah.
I could see that. I can't remember if Liz Allen was that way, but I could see that.
Liz Allen was always a terrible person to Peter Parker in the early comics until.
Oh, okay.
And she like would always ignore him and like talk down to him and stuff until he got his powers and had a little bit more courage to stand up to Flash Thompson. And then she had feelings for him, but they never pursued a relationship. It never really worked out. And eventually she marries Harry Osborn in the future, and they have a kid, and Harry goes off the deep end, and it's a whole thing.
Maybe they do the like, and I don't know who this would be, and maybe it's this Michelle person, whoever that is. Like maybe they made up a character for this, but like they could have the really nerdy girl who's as much of an outsider as he is, as opposed to the like super popular but also really into science and kind of genius Gwen Stacy that they did in the Amazing movies.
That would be cool. I'd really like to see them do the Betty Brant and Peter relationship in this. If they introduce the Daily Bugle and Betty works there, because like I don't know, a lot of people say
people are saying like, that's weird because she's gonna be like 5-6 years older or more, or a lot more.
People say that's weird, but I always thought it worked in the comics because Peter Parker was always so much more mature than the rest of his peers, and that's sort of, I think, what Betty always saw in him. That's talked about like in later stuff. I mean, in the comics, it's not really discussed all that much, in the early stuff at least. But I think it would be interesting to see Peter like have an older woman be sort of interested in him in the sense that like he's the guy that carries this like heavy burden that most kids don't do, and that changes a person, and Peter Parker is much more responsible than them and stuff. So
I'm with you that story-wise that's a good idea. I think in this day and age they wouldn't chance it.
Yeah, you're probably right.
It's just that's too taboo. They would get so much crap on Twitter.
Yeah,
it's just that's not going to happen now. I mean, I'm with you. It ought to. I mean, they ought to be able to do that. They're not going to go there.
Yeah, I mean, they could potentially do it maybe like she's not 5 years older than him. Maybe she's like, just graduated high school or something. They
But
could,
then she'd have to be like
she's
an
still
intern
18.
or something.
Yeah, maybe they could do it that way, but I'd like to see that relationship done because I always liked Betty Brant a lot as a character.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't work out between the two of them, I always really liked her, and she was in the Ray movies, and her and Peter always had a flirtation thing going on. But of course, they never pursued a relationship because he was busy chasing after Mary Jane in those movies.
Yeah, and how much of that stuff, because, we're talking about that and Robbie, and, like, how much of that stuff in the Spider-Man movies is kind of like blink and you miss it, and it's kind of just for us fans that know what that is, like that stuff's all kind of just quick fan service stuff, I think.
Right.
More than anything.
Yeah, I'd like to actually see that stuff be explored, which would be really, really awesome. And then eventually, if you want to do Hobgoblin, that's where you introduce Ned Leeds, who is the primary rival for Peter's affection of her, and she eventually marries him, and we find out he's not, he's involved with the Hobgoblin stuff later on. So,
spoiler alert.
Yeah. I mean, the cool thing about the Spider-Man universe is all these characters are so interconnected, and in and out of Peter's life. So, I don't know, the love interest thing. I'm kind of convinced we're not going to get Gwen in these at least until much later, and I think we'll probably introduce Mary Jane the way she was in the comics eventually, where Aunt May is like, "I know this girl that you would really like," and Peter would be like, "I leave me alone. Don't try to set me up with the girls." And then he meets her, and she's a complete knockout. We haven't done that in the movies yet. They were going to do it in the Amazing Spider-Man 2, but all of her scenes were cut. So,
yeah, and I gotta say, like, I don't really mean this as far as like. I enjoy The Amazing Spider-Man, but there's a part of me that almost wishes that somehow or rather, just like in retrospect, those movies hadn't happened and this was the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
Just because this is gonna sting. This will have a long time, and I mean, I know there were a lot of people that were really angry that it went to Marvel and that it was being rebooted again. Even people that didn't like Amazing Spider-Man 2. People keep talking about like just Spider-Man burnout. They don't even want to see him anymore. But the Marvel Cinematic Universe is kind of in. I don't want to go as far as to say that it's fueling Hollywood by itself, but it's helping a lot.
It's just about, yeah.
It's gonna be Disney, certainly. I mean, you put this in Star Wars together.
Star Wars, yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna stick, and the only reason we're not gonna be able to do things as early as as you and I are gonna wish that we could, like Gwen Stacy, is just because we just did that.
That's true. Yeah. At the same time, I don't know, like. Maybe it's a good decision to wait on that stuff too, because like often you don't meet your soulmate as your first relationship either. Like one of the things I always liked about the Spider-Man comics is like Peter has all these relationships that don't work out before he meets Gwen and Mary Jane.
Yeah, they have time to do that, Dan, because it's serialized storytelling, and that's why it should be a TV show.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong about that.
No, I know, and I know you're not arguing with me on that. I'm just, and that wasn't me saying like they shouldn't be movies if they can't be a TV show. But I'll say this, and I'm sorry for belaboring this. I was gonna wait until we stopped recording, but I'll go ahead and say this to you now, Dan. I don't think that it's. I don't buy that Spider-Man can't be done on a TV budget.
Well, I mean, I'm with you. I think that it could be done on the Netflix TV budget.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We've got comparable effects in Flash.
I think the only reason that Spider-Man
competent.
Netflix
I meant to say
series
competent. Comparable to what, Cap? Sorry, competent. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead, Dan.
I was just saying. I think the only reason. I mean, we've talked about this before. I don't know if we ever said it on camera. But I'm with you. I'd much rather have a Spider-Man TV show because it lends itself. I think most of these characters would be better as serialized seasons of television with budgets rather than standalone movies.
But especially Spider-Man. I mean, he's the next one next to Daredevil.
Right, exactly.
Even more than Daredevil. I mean, I don't read. Maybe some fans of this do. I don't read Fantastic Four comics and think this is too soap opera to be movies. You know what I mean?
I can see the argument for the serialized.
See, now that you're saying that, I could see the argument, but I don't think maybe as much as Spider-Man. I think X-Men certainly.
X-Men would make a great TV show too.
We're gonna finally probably get that. So.
Right.
Or at least
But what I was saying
an
about
X-Men
the
thing.
Spider-Man TV show thing, like I think the only reason it's not a Netflix show is because Marvel figures they'll make more money at the box office than they would if they put it on
Yes,
Netflix.
you're absolutely right. But what I hear from people all the time is like you can't do him on TV. It's too expensive. I don't understand that.
I don't think so either.
I mean, you can't do him the way he's been done in the movies before, but I like you can't always do wire work and you can't always have those kind of camera rigs. But I think you can. But like, and you can't do that if it's a mostly action driven show. But that's my thing, is that Spider-Man shouldn't be a mostly action driven thing. He should have big set pieces that we lead up to and that serve the story. But you shouldn't. Most of your Spider-Man episodes should be pretty dialogue heavy things, like Daredevil.
Yeah, I mean, if you read the early Spider-Man comics, there are points where Stan Lee, in cheeky editor's notes, will say, "I know the entire issue has been people out of superhero costumes talking, but here comes the exciting part."
He'll apologize and remind you you're reading a superhero book. He'll be like, "Okay, so you know that thing? This is my favorite one. I can't remember which issue it was, but it was one of the ones that we talked about. You remember that thing on the cover? Turn the page. That's about to finally happen." I love that. That's hilarious.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I think, especially, it'll become even more of a glaring issue potentially if they do what I hope they do with these Spider-Man movies, is make them a little bit more smaller scale than the other Marvel Cinematic, the world is at stake plots that we've had for the Avengers and
If it's
the
a
Iron
world
Man
at
movies
stake
and stuff.
thing, and if it ends on a really typical fight climax, I mean, like, the thing is, you're talking about action movies and superhero things, so like when people always begrudge Marvel movies for ending with a climactic action sequence, I'm like, a climactic action sequence, I'm like, yeah, I mean, you don't want it to look formulaic and be the same thing every time, but like, you're usually at the end of a superhero thing, even in comics, like, you're gonna expect a big fight, and like that a lot of the time that's your conflict is gonna be in it. So I get that, but man, if it's too like by the numbers, that movie will get crucified.
That's true. Yeah.
So I think that it needs to be more small time, and I think that they need to risk not being too big. And everything we've heard so far confirms that that's what they're trying to make.
Yeah, Kevin Feige had said it's supposed to be like a John Hughes movie in the vein of stuff like The Breakfast Club. For those who don't know, John Hughes. I'm not all that familiar with his entire catalog of work myself, but I think going with that sort of vibe for the movie is a very good idea.
I really think if Mark Webb had played more to his strengths, and went all the way with relationship drama and backed off on the crazy comic book stuff, people would like that movie better. I think people would have resisted it at first because they'd be like, "This is really boring," and then they'd think about it and watch it again and be like, "Oh, this is actually a really good movie."
Yeah, and it seems like it's weird to me, like, what the situation is with Spider-Man and Marvel. Like, Kevin Feige came out in an interview like the other day and said that they have complete creative control over Spider-Man, but I don't know how that's true because Sony was intimately involved in the casting, and
Were they?
yeah, like they had to agree on casting an actor together and stuff, and Kevin Feige is claiming that like Marvel has complete creative control.
Okay, but here's the thing. That might have been part of the initial agreement, that like we get say on certain things for the foundation of it, but then after that, every choice is yours.
Yeah,
like that makes sense to me.
I guess I just don't see a world in which Sony would agree to a deal like that, but maybe they did. I mean,
maybe Marvel insisted, and it was the only way they were going to make money. I mean, like maybe it was either that or we risk making more movies in a franchise that people are revolting against.
Yeah.
I mean, I totally get why they felt like they had to do that finally. But like,
yeah, totally. But regardless of my my thoughts on how unbelievable that sounds.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's very encouraging that Marvel has complete creative control over this stuff because they've been so good, at least with like the solo characters, picking a genre of a movie and kind of making that into a superhero movie. Like the Captain America Winter Soldier is very clearly a spy movie with superhero elements before it's like a formulaic superhero movie when they're at their best. So I hope that this movie, because it's the crown jewel of Marvel coming home, they are able to make they put as much effort into the movie as possible. I mean, not that they would like, you know, not put effort into this. I don't expect that, but I'm just hoping that this is the one that they treat with the most care, and it ends up being a genre movie like Captain America was.
No, I'm with you, because if Sony had their fingers in that pie, it would possibly watch like it was made by committee again.
Right.
Where it's like there's a laundry list of things that have to go in the Spider-Man movie, and I think that's why you had the turn everybody into lizards plot in Amazing Spider-Man that didn't fit. It shouldn't have been there.
Right, exactly.
But it's like we have to have, you know, it's not going to feel big enough. We've got to have this big, crazy, punchy comic book thing at the end, and like it needs to be heightened and stylized. You've got to have stuff with Peter Parker in the costume, sure, but you can't try to be so all-inclusive like that you don't include anybody. We've had that conversation 1,000 times. As soon as I saw the name for the next movie, I immediately bought into that, Dan. Sony would never have signed off on that title. They wouldn't have. Because that title sounds like we finally got it back where it belongs, away from these morons. They would never have signed off on that title. As soon as because like you didn't like that title, for you weren't sure about it, and I totally understood that. But the reason I immediately said I'm so happy with this title is like I was relieved and was like, okay, Marvel's going to make the movie they want to make. Sony would never have signed off on that title.
Yeah, that's true, and I mean...
And I think they were trying to tell us that with that title. And that's part of the reason they picked that title, was they're like, we need something that Sony would not have signed off on.
Yeah, and I'm kind of encouraged by the way, I mean, to not to read too much into a logo, but...
That's okay. I spent like 15 minutes on what Homecoming means to that, potentially to that movie.
Yeah, I think the logo looks a little too unserious for the way Sony has tried to market the Spider-Man movies before. Like, it just looks like the old comic book title mixed with like a Saturday morning cartoon title. Like it's got the curved letters like the old Amazing logo, and it's like got this sort of cartoony vibe to it. Like the other Sony movies, at least. Tried to present themselves as really kind of serious things in all the advertising and stuff. So I'm hoping that this has a little bit more fun with itself, which, you know, the Marvel movies have done a really good job with so far. So I expect that.
Yeah, they advertise them as big, great, fun movies, and then you see them, and then sometimes they get really heavy.
Yeah, I mean, Civil War was like that. There were moments of extreme levity that had me laughing, and then there were parts that were really intense, too.
No, I say they sell them that way. They also sell them as dramas.
Yes, that's right.
But they're going to err on the side of fun, and there are certainly a lot of fans that don't like that they've been doing that. But I think by this point and you know, disagree with me if you want to, folks. But I think that by this point, they've pretty well proven that they've got you know, they've got a sense of variety, and they know when that they're not just being silly and cracking jokes, that they're telling stories. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Right, I agree. You know,
versatility is the word I was looking for.
I'm hoping that the director they got for this movie is going to be really great.
Yeah,
but it almost like just listening to the Russos talk about the how excited they were to have Spider-Man in their story. They said
they were making it.
I don't know how true this is because I'm with some people. I don't think Spider-Man is necessary for this story. I think the way he's introduced is as poignant and thematically important to the story as it possibly could have been, but it does seem like he was added in after they knew they could use him. According to the Russos,
that's exactly what I said.
According to the Russos in the press junket, they were writing the story with Spider-Man in mind, and he became so integral to the story that Kevin Feige had to make the deal for them to make the movie work.
I don't buy into that.
It doesn't seem like that to me watching the movie, but who knows? What I was going to say was the Russos talk a lot about how Spider-Man has always been their favorite comic book character, and they were elated to get him. I really wish they were the ones making this movie.
Yeah, I mean, I can see why you said, but maybe they'll get a crack at a sequel. Maybe they'll get to put him in. I mean, they're obviously going to get to play with him some more because they're making Infinity War.
Yeah, exactly. And I could totally eat my words. Like, I don't want to put down the director that got the movie. He's had some movies that I haven't seen that people have apparently really liked, and he's probably a talented guy. Otherwise, Marvel would have hired him. But just the Russos have been the most impressive directors to me out of anyone that Marvel has hired so far.
That Agent Carter pilot is dynamite.
Yeah, and I'm just really high on the Russo brothers in general with this material, and I just loved everything they did with Spider-Man in this movie, regardless of how he fit into the story as a puzzle piece necessarily, plot wise. But yeah, I'm just I kind of hope that they're at least somewhat involved with this. I mean, they kind of are in that they introduced him, and the people that are making the movie are working off of what they did. But I kind of wish they were involved in some capacity because they seem to really get the character. I mean, the movie tells us as much as we need to know about that character in like 10 minutes as some of the other Sony movies have given us. Not that those movies are bad. I mean, I'm always a defender of the Sony movies. I'm not anti-Sony Pictures. I like all of them to some degree, other than Spider-Man 3. But I just thought that they did a really good job. So,
we'll go ahead and wrap up, but I gotta say this because I this just came to my head when you mentioned the logo, and that it looks sort of Saturday morning cartoony. I really want the sequel to be called Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends.
Yeah, I hope there aren't a lot of amazing. I just want Spider-Man movies.
Yes, but eventually I just want Marvel to have the audacity to call a movie that. I just think that would be the best thing. Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, and then they have this like huge negotiation so that they can do it their version of Iceman.
That would be awesome. I would really love it.
And they bring back Sean Ashmore.
Yeah, I mean, I would really love it if eventually they got to some of the other like Spider-Man comic book titles. Like, I've always wanted in my head a Spider-Man movie called Web of Spider-Man, and have the poster be Spider-Man surrounded by all of the floating heads of the supporting cast, like they have on so many covers from the old Spider-Man days, and they still do that to this day to homage it. But I want that to happen. I think
you could see that with this. I mean, I think that they're likely to do a lot of throwback stuff in their advertising. I wouldn't put a poster with heads past them.
I would love if there. I love floating heads, people.
Dan's really into floating heads. Like he would have really enjoyed Richard Donner's Krypton.
Yeah, he would have.
Dan would have totally loved to live there. He's like, you know what? I'm being prosecuted, and I'm gonna get thrown into the Phantom Zone, but I get to see the floating heads. Floating heads, I love them.
Yeah, so that's something I'd like to see eventually in the grand scheme of this franchise is floating heads. Make it happen, Marvel.
You know what I want to see? I don't know how you incorporate this or why he would ever do it since we didn't start with it. I still kind of want to see the armpit webbing.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Just saying, I think that'd be really cool. It could be a modification Tony Stark makes to the suit later for no good reason.
Yeah, maybe that's something that Peter Parker adds on his own too. I mean,
yeah,
I'm sure armpit webbing wouldn't be that hard to make.
It wouldn't be practical, but it would look cool.
Yeah, I love the armpit webbing. Partly because when I was a kid, they used to always make underoos, like the t-shirts, and they would have the giant armpit webbing on them, and I was like, this is the coolest thing ever.
I also think he's likely to have the signal.
The spider signal?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we do see it at the end of Civil War, so yeah, he'll have it.
Oh, wait, we do? You mentioned that earlier, and I wasn't sure what you were talking about. We see the signal?
Oh, did you not stay to the very end of the credits?
Okay, so here's the thing, and everybody that thinks I'm an idiot, just hear me out. I saw it 3 weeks early, and they hadn't put it in there yet.
Oh, okay.
So I had not heard that there was well, I'll have to make sure and stay next time. I had not heard that there was one at the end. See, this happened with Avengers also. Well, like, the shawarma thing wasn't there for the early showings.
Oh, weird.
Because I saw that early also, and the shawarma thing wasn't there yet. I had to see it on a second viewing. So I got up and left this time after the mid-credit scene, because the last time I saw it, it didn't have one.
Yeah, at the very end of the credits is this really funny scene with Aunt May, like, mopping up Peter's wounds. And, well, not wounds, but
I'm so angry about that.
What's that?
I'm so angry that I didn't stay for that. Anyway.
Yeah, it's cool. So like she's putting ice on his forehead, and he makes a lot of like quippy remarks about like you should have seen the other guy. He was huge and all this. It was funny, and all the while Peter Parker like he's playing with the web shooters, and a light shines on, and then he has to hide it from Aunt Wade by crossing his arms, and then at the very end we see him pointed at the ceiling after she leaves, and it's the spider signal, and then it says Spider-Man will return, and then it
okay,
it's awesome.
That's cool. When you said that, I was like, I don't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, so the spider signal is on his web shooters now, which is much more practical than the belt thing from the comics.
I'm glad it's not on the belt. Yeah, that'd be weird.
I kind of wish it was because it's goofy and awesome. But it makes much more sense to be on the web shooters.
Anyway, well, I tried to end this 45 minutes ago, and then we got into other things that we hadn't talked about, so...
Wait, I just thought of something.
Gosh darn it.
I'm just kidding.
Everybody, thanks as always for listening to our almost said spoiler cast. It feels like a spoiler cast because it's this long for one of our speculation videos, and for this super long speculation video. And leave your comments, let us know what you'd like to see, what you think about some of our ideas and predictions and crazy, outlandish speculations. Dan, so glad you were able to do this with me again.
Yeah, I'm glad we were able to get together and do it. After Homecoming comes out, we'll have to do it again.
Yeah, yes, and then that will be, our 6,000. I don't even remember what number I said, but it'll be the next one. Anyway, thanks again for listening, folks. I'm Captain Logan,
and I'm Dan.